Hello everyone! Welcome to our TOEFL preparation course. If you are taking this course, you are probably planning to apply to a university located in one of the English-speaking countries, or maybe your studies will be in English. TOEFL stands for the Test of English as a Foreign Language. The TOEFL test measures your ability to use and understand the English language as it is read, heard, spoken, and written in the university classroom. Alongside with IELTS, the TOEFL is the most accepted English language test in the world. More than 9,000 universities, agencies, and other institutions in more than 130 countries accept TOEFL scores as part of their admissions criteria. In order for the TOEFL test to measure how well you read, listen, speak, and write in English, and how well you use these skills together, you will be asked to integrate these skills. For example, you may read a passage or listen to a lecture, and then write or speak about what you learned. So let's start with a little TOEFL orientation. The first version of the TOEFL was paper-based, and so it was called the PBT, Paper-Based TOEFL. It was composed of 3 sections: reading, grammar, and listening. The test took approximately 2 hours, and was used for a long period of time. The maximum score attainable was 677. This test was eventually replaced because it was obvious that non-native English speakers could achieve high scores while still being poor English speakers. In other words, the test received a lot of criticism for being inaccurate. The second version of the test was the computer-based TOEFL, or CBT. This test was short-lived and also had 3 sections: listening, grammar or writing, and reading. Once the TOEFL hit the computer, it was a short step towards the internet. The third and current version of the test is the Internet-based TOEFL, or IBT, and this test is a big step away from the previous 2 versions. Nearly every college and university accepts IBT scores. If you know that you must take the TOEFL, it is going to be the IBT, and your next step is to register for the exam online. To do so, you'll create an account, if you haven't already, on the ETS website. ETS stands for English Testing Services, and is a non-profit company that creates, administers, and scores the exam. Registration is a simple process, and once registered on the site, you'll be able to pick a test date that works for you and pay online. The TOEFL costs around $200 in US currency, but can vary slightly according to your testing location. The website accepts many forms of payment, so it shouldn't be an issue whether you're using a credit card or your bank account. The TOEFL is given all over the world. You will find 95% of test dates on either Friday or Saturday of nearly every week, so they are given very often. However, it's important to remember that depending on your location, TOEFL test centers can fill up fast, so make sure to schedule your test 2 to 6 weeks ahead depending on your location. And don't delay! During the test, you'll be tested on 4 sections in the following order and manner. Please have a look at this table. As you can see from this table, the TOEFL has 4 sections: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. On the reading section, you'll have 3 to 4 academic passages with about 700 words long, and you should answer 14 questions each. On the listening, you'll get 4 to 6 lectures, some with classroom discussion, 3 to 5 minutes long with 6 questions, 2 to 3 conversations, each 3 minutes long with 5 questions, total in 60 to 90 minutes. After the listening, you'll get a mandatory 10-minute break. After the break, you'll move on to the speaking section. On the speaking, you'll get 6 speaking tasks in 25 minutes. Finally, on the writing, you'll get 2 tasks in 55 minutes. Altogether, that's 70 to 107 questions, 6 speaking tasks, and 2 writing tasks, and the whole test takes roughly more than 4 hours. Even with a break in the middle, it's quite a long test. What is the difference between the TOEFL test and the IELTS test? Although the Test of English as a Foreign Language, or TOEFL, has been considered as the best measure of English language proficiency in the world, University and college admissions offices are also increasingly starting accepting the International English Language Testing System, or IELTS, for admission purposes. Before you begin reviewing for either test, learn the differences between them. If you aren't an English native speaker, you'll almost always be required to sit for an English language proficiency test as part of your application to study abroad at an English-speaking university. So, the two most accepted English language tests worldwide are the International English Language Test System, that is, IELTS, and the Test of English as a Foreign Language, TOEFL tests. Whilst both accurately test your level of English and are widely accepted across over thousands of institutions worldwide, the two tests are different in their approach, structure, and teaching criteria, so you should think carefully about which one you'll choose to sit. In our previous lesson, we gave an explanation on what is TOEFL. Now, let's have a look at IELTS. The IELTS is an English language test that is used for educational, immigration, and occupational purposes and is accepted by over 10,000 institutions across 150 countries worldwide. Jointly administered by the British Council, University of Cambridge, ESOL Examinations, and IDP Education Australia, IELTS uses British English and is more likely to be favored by UK and institutions in Commonwealth nations, such as New Zealand and Australia. Depending on the entry requirements of your study program, you might need to take either the academic or general training IELTS exam. However, beware if you require a Tier 4 visa for study in the UK, it is recommended that you take IELTS or Pearson's test, as TOEFL has difficulties in acceptance by the UK Home Office as a secure English test. But if you do not require a visa for your studies, a TOEFL test will be sufficient for your application, as long as your scores meet the entry requirements, which are usually at fixed levels for the university, although some exceptions may apply. Also, remember, TOEFL is based more on American English, so it might make more sense to take this one if you are planning to study in the US. You should always confirm what your university accepts, including what score you must achieve, as ultimately, this is all that matters. Now, let's have a look at general differences between these two exams. Aside from the different styles of English each exam is based on, TOEFL exam questions are almost entirely multiple choice, whereas IELTS requires you to respond to a range of different question types, such as short answer, gap filling, and short essay tasks. The IELTS is significantly shorter than the TOEFL exam, taking approximately 2 hours and 40 minutes, versus 4 hours to complete the TOEFL. There is only one type of TOEFL exam that is done entirely on the computer, whereas there are two types of IELTS that are both completed on paper. Students applying for English-speaking tertiary programs will need to sit the academic IELTS exam, whereas the general training exam is used to meet immigration and some occupational requirements. IELTS and TOEFL favor different modes of thought and problem solving. Because TOEFL is primarily multiple choice, students will need to be able to think analytically to weigh up the differences between their options. IELTS requires more use of memory and draws on broader comprehension skills, as students are faced with different question styles. The similarity is that both are English language tests aimed at pre-university students planning to make the step to higher education. Both evaluate how well you can combine your listening, reading, writing, and speaking skills. You have to pay a fee to take both tests. For both, it can vary depending on where exactly you take the test, but expect to pay between $150 to $250. Exam structures. Let's consider speaking. Whilst both exams have a speaking component, the IELTS speaking tests is taken face-to-face with an examiner. In the TOEFL exam, you'll answer 6 questions into a microphone, which are recorded and later sent to a group of 6 reviewers. Your IELTS speaking score will only be determined by a single examiner. The IELTS test will take between 11 to 14 minutes, and may not necessarily be on the same day as the other exam components. whilst the TOEFL will take about 20 minutes and is always on the same day as the rest of the exam. Where the IELTS exam features a range of different accents speaking in English, TOEFL mostly features American speakers. Writing. The written component of the TOEFL exam is typed as opposed to the paper-based IELTS exam. TOEFL requires you to complete 2 tasks, the first of which will be a 5-paragraph essay between 300 to 350 words. For the second task, you will need to take notes from a section of text and lecture excerpt on the same topic, and use them to construct a 150 to 225 word response. The IELTS writing test also has 2 sections, the first of which, however, requires you to summarize or explain information presented in a graph, chart, table, or diagram. In the second, you'll need to write a 200 to 250 word response to a prompt that offers a point of view, argument, or asks you to write in a particular language style. Reading. The reading tests for both exams are quite similar. The TOEFL reading test is made up of 3 to 5 reading sections you will have 20 minutes to complete, each drawn from academic content you'd be likely to encounter in a classroom. You will have to answer a series of multiple-choice questions, testing how well you've understood the texts. The IELTS reading test has 3 sections, also each 20 minutes long, and with texts academic in nature, but with a wider range of question types that could be anything from fill-in-the-gaps to short answer. Questions are also designed to test how well you've understood the text in its particular use of language, ideas, and style. Listening. Tests vary quite significantly in their listening components. The TOEFL listening test is between 40 to 60 minutes long and involves you listening to excerpts from university lectures or conversations on a university campus. You will be required to take notes whilst listening and answer a series of multiple-choice questions afterward. In the IELTS listening test, students can answer questions whilst they are listening to the recordings and will need to respond to a number of different question types and exercises of different lengths. Scoring. The speaking and writing sections of the TOEFL are graded based on how they appear as a whole, including your range of vocabulary, writing style, and grammar. Those of the IELTS are considered based on separate grades of individual criteria, such as your use of logic, cohesion, grammar, and fluency. For example, an essay with a logical progression of ideas, but poor grammar, will score higher in a TOEFL exam, whereas an essay with strong grammar and vocabulary that is weaker in expressing an idea will do better by the IELTS criteria. The IELTS is graded on a band system from 1 to 9, with your overall score being an average of your separate scores in all 4 tests. Your overall score will be rounded to the nearest half band, i.e., if your overall average is 6.25, it will be rounded up to a final score of 6.5. And TOEFL is a single test that is graded out of 120 points. Hi there! Welcome back. Today we will talk about TOEFL score scales. Since the TOEFL test is changing significantly, the score scale is also changing. Scores from the TOEFL IBT test provide information about performance in the 4 skill areas, which are listening, 0 to 30 scores, reading, 0 to 30, speaking, 0 to 30, and writing, also from 0 to 30 points. Total score would be between 0 to 120. So the total score is the sum of the 4 skill scores. So now, let's look at the rating of speaking and writing responses. In the speaking section, the responses to all speaking tasks are digitally recorded and sent to ETS's online scoring network. The responses from each test taker are scored by at least 3 different human raters. In addition, some of the tasks are scored by 2 raters in order to check the reliability of the ratings. The response for each task is rated on a scale of 0 to 4. The average of all 6 ratings is converted to a scaled score of 0 to 30. Raters evaluate the test taker's ability in topic development, delivery, and language use. For topic development, Raters consider whether the test taker has addressed the task and conveyed relevant information. They also consider whether the test taker has effectively synthesized and summarized the information in the integrated tasks. Raters evaluate if the delivery of the response is clear and smooth, and whether the delivery is consistent throughout the response for overall intelligibility. Lastly, raters evaluate the range and accuracy of the test taker's vocabulary and grammar. In the writing section, again, the responses to all writing tasks are sent to ETS's online scoring network. Each task is rated by 2 human raters on a score scale of 0 to 5. If the 2 ratings differ by more than 1 point, a third rater evaluates the response and resolves the score. The average of the scores on the 2 writing tasks is converted to a scaled score of 0 to 30. The response to the integrated writing task is scored on the quality of writing, organization, appropriate and precise use of grammar and vocabulary, and the completeness and accuracy of the content. The independent writing essay is scored on the overall quality of the writing, development, organization, and appropriate and precise use of grammar and vocabulary. Now, score reports. Score reports provide information about an individual's readiness to participate and succeed in academic studies in an English-speaking environment. Score reports include 4 skill scores and total score. Scores are reported online 15 business days after the test. Test takers and score-receiving institutions and agencies are able to view the scores online free of charge. Paper copies of score reports are mailed shortly after scores are posted online. Test taker score reports also include performance feedback, which indicates their performance level and describes what test takers in the reported score ranges can do. In the future, the performance feedback will also include suggestions for improvement. Each institution sets its own requirements for TOEFL IBT scores. Test takers taking the btw TOEFL test to fulfill an admissions requirement should ask their target institutions for score requirements. For a list of colleges, universities, and agencies around the world that accept TOEFL scores, visit www.ets.org/TOEFL. The comparison tables on TOEFL scores are also available on the TOEFL website at www.ets.org/TOEFL/NextGen. Hi there. Today we will try to create a TOEFL study plan to be effective with our class. There are a few different ways to study for the test. First, we recommend the following. Number 1. Take a full-length practice test to identify areas that are most difficult for you. You may need to study some portions of the test more than others. Plan to take at least one practice test every 1 to 2 weeks to familiarize yourself with the test format. Number 2. When taking practice tests, pretend it is a real test. Go to a room with no distractions, and if taking a paper-based version of the test, set a timer to follow the exact time allotment of the actual test. Number 3. We also recommend purchasing your own prep book, and ETS has many book recommendations at the ETS website, as does www.amazon.com. Although there are a lot of online resources, it's helpful to have a book that you can write in and highlight. Number 4. Take at least one rest day to read fun things in English that aren't study materials. Read news articles, watch a movie in English, or try reading a short story or poem. Here's a local literary magazine with fiction stories and poems at www.philadelphiastories.org. So, plan number 1. Devote each week to a different portion of the test. For example, week 1, work on speaking. Week 2, on listening. Week 3, writing. And week 4, vocabulary and reading. It actually helps to study a little vocabulary each week, since you likely won't remember words if you memorize them quickly and in large quantities. Plan number 2. Combine questions from each section for a daily study plan. Here's one way you could structure a daily study plan that addresses each section of the test. So your daily plan could be something like study 1 to 2 new vocabulary words a day from a TOEFL list, 10 per week. Don't memorize the definitions. Practice them in actual sentences. Most dictionaries have examples of sentences. Study 1 listening and 1 speaking question, and outline or write 1 practice essay. Take time to review the essay for grammatical issues. If you've forgotten a grammar rule, pick up a grammar textbook or go online and do a few practice grammar exercises. Learn 1 or 2 new idiomatic or transitional phrases a week. A good list can be found in this link here. Please have a look. And here. Also, we advise you to learn 1 or 2 Latin and Greek roots a week. These are very helpful because even if you don't know a word's definition, you can guess its meaning if you know the root. A good list can be found here. Please have a look. And here. And, importantly, do not try to study the day before the test. Instead, just try watching a TV show you like in English or reading a short news article to keep yourself immersed in the language. Tips for the exam day. Apart from studying the 4 TOEFL test preparation skills, that is reading, listening, speaking, and writing, there are other aspects of what we should expect the day of testing. So, here are some tips. Timing. Reach the test center at least 45 minutes before the reporting time. If the test is scheduled at 4 p.m., then the reporting time would be at 3:30 p.m. So reaching, say, by 2:45 to 3 o'clock would be good. You have to fill out a confidentiality agreement form and brief instruction session for 5 to 10 minutes. You are allowed in the exam room on a first-come, first-served basis, so it makes sense to be early and grab a seat. Actually, it doesn't make much difference, but it might help you when you reach the speaking section. You'll be among the first few people who would start answering. Things to carry with you to the test would be confirmation ticket printout to confirm your presence for the test. However, it is not required once you have made an entry in the attendance register. Carry your primary identification, which is your passport. Secondary identification proof. It is a must too. A driver's license or a similar document with your signed photograph would be good enough. Remember, employee IDs or credit cards are not acceptable. You might not be allowed to take the test if you do not carry the sufficient documents. Things not to carry. Rough sheets or stationery, water bottle, mobile phones. You wouldn't be allowed anything inside, not even your wallet and watch. You would be allotted a locker where you can keep all your belongings. Rough sheets and pencils are provided at the test center itself. For the test day, wear comfortable clothes. When it comes to test day, make sure you come dressed comfortably. After all, nobody gets his best when wearing tight clothing. While the TOEFL test is certainly your ability to speak, remember, be comfortable enough in your position during the 4-hour test. It would be a good idea to layer, as you never know if a room is too hot or too cold. Eat before the test. Most campus facilities are in the morning or at 12 o'clock. Be sure to eat something so you won't think about it during the test and won't be distracted with hunger. It's a good idea to bring a very light meal for a break of 10 minutes between your listening and speaking sections. Reading section in TOEFL. There are 3 reading passages, each 20 minutes, with approximately 13 to 14 questions. The last question in all the 3 passages is the trickiest of all. It is to select the best inferences from the given passage. It's worth 2 points. Plan your time in such a way that you have at least 4 to 5 minutes to answer this last question. Listening section. It isn't difficult at all. All you have to do is concentrate and take some notes here and there. Don't get distracted with noises of people who have already started their speaking section. So, listening section has some 6 to 8 odd tasks. Few conversations, mostly among university students who discuss their problems on campus, etc., and a few lectures on various academic topics like biology, ecology, etc., followed by some questions on these discussions. This section is easily manageable. There is a 10-minute mandatory break after the 2 sections, as I've mentioned earlier. You will have to leave your place and go out. You can eat something if you've got a light meal from home. Remember, you're not supposed to touch your mobiles during this break. Speaking section. It isn't difficult if you know how to respond in the given time frame. Also, before the test, you must improve your typing skills. You know that independent TOEFL essay should be 300 words, right? Many students get frustrated as not being able to present their ideas on screen as fast as they want. Practice typing before the test, especially if you had the luxury of study for the TOEFL 1 or 2 months up front. So, after the 4-hour struggle, you are finally through. Don't wait for the range of your scores to pop up. Your scores will be sent to you after 15 days. You will be able to view them online on your TOEFL account. Now you can give yourself a small reward, perhaps as a night out or dinner with friends. All your hard work will pay off for sure. Hope these tips help. Good luck with your test.